Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting, because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Today, we're talking about practice based on an article from USA Hockey, October 2021 edition. 5 tips to making a better practice plan. So Christie and Mike jumped right into that today, giving us questions and our professional opinions on things. And it was really a great discussion. We hope you're going to enjoy the episode. But as it is the start of the episode, we got to let you know that it's brought to you by Team Clicks. That's TEAMCLIX.com, teamclicks.com. Check them out. They've got every single sports team in sunglasses, right? And blue blockers and prescription. So the arms look like your favorite sports teams. Again, I want you to check them out on their website, TEAMCLIX.com, teamclicks.com. It's going to be a really great holiday gift for the sport fan or sport athlete in your life. So check them out, teamclicks.com, teamclicks.com, teamclicks.com with an X. Without further ado, enjoy this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. That's Christie Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli, and I'm Lee Elias, and today we're talking about practice. Not a game, practice. For those of you from Philadelphia, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But we're talking about, in the October 2021 edition of USA Hockey Magazine, our very own Christie Casciano Burns pointed out that there's a really great article in here called Talking About Practice, and it's about 5 tips that coaches can take into practice. So she came to us and she said, Mike, Lee, I want to talk about this on the air today. I want to run it by you guys. I think it'll be a great episode. And we naturally said, Christie, this whole show is based off your book, My Kids Play Hockey. You write for USA Hockey. Am I plugging you enough? So let's do it. Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to walk through this today.
I'll show you where the article is. So after you're done reading my article in this month's copy of USA
There's the plug.
Hockey Magazine about the golden rules of hockey, which we've talked about extensively, by the way. That was a great episode. If you didn't catch that one, just flip over to the next page and you'll see it. This is really good. It's talking about practice, which I love. That definitely caught my eye. And there's 5 keys to victory if you want to tackle and succeed this season. First one is creating building blocks for success. So that's what you need to do. And you guys know that as coaches early in the season is you have to build the foundation. Right. If you're going to go up the mountain and climb that high mountain and succeed, you need a base, you need a foundation. And the way that they said, I bet you guys will agree to this, set the tone early, letting both players and the parents, don't forget the parents, know what your expectations are for the season, both on and off the ice. Let the players know it's their responsibility to improve every time they step on the ice. So that's great in theory. How do you do that, guys?
It's a great question. First thing I want to say is that I'm learning as a youth coach for the first time that having the parents on your side, which the parents on our team are, is very important, right? And you're not always going to get all of them, but it does make your life a lot easier, number one. Number two, Mike, and I'm actually going to kind of pose this as a follow-up question to you with this too, I'm amazed sometimes how often, this is not just in youth hockey, Christie, coaches come with a plan to practice. The players have no idea what the plan is. There's no explanation of the plan. There's just, here's the drills we're doing today, do them and we'll leave. What a missed opportunity as a coach. And again, some of this has to do with time, but I want my players to understand not just the drill, but the why behind the drill. I want that connection point of why we're working on something either really basic, like skating or passing or shooting, all the way up to advanced systems, right? I want them to know the why behind the drill so they can apply the creativity to the game, right? And when you do that in terms of creating the building blocks to success, this just comes with coaches planning, which, look, most coaches do plan a practice. I'm not jumping on that, but when you break it down again, Mike, this is where the question comes in, is you got to prioritize certain things ahead of other things. And I think that one of the things we talk about is, you don't come in with this, vomit of all these things we have to work on. Keep it to one or two things early in the season, build on those skills, because those skills lead to other skills. Mike, your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think especially at the youngest levels, as coaches, we tend to, want to, outthink the game. We want to try to make this complex array of practice plans and drills and schemes and movement. And really what children need is they need structure, and they need repetition, and they need, just like learning your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s.
Right.
You have to understand that at the age you're coaching, you have to cater those systems and drills and thought processes to make it easy. There's nothing more frustrating than coming with a plan and your kids can't implement the plan, right, because you structured a plan that's not ready for their development. And to Christie's point, to the fact that they haven't built that foundation of skill yet. So I think just, it's great. And again, having parents on board, it's almost like a must for any youth hockey coach. I know even with me, I struggle with this all the time, only because it's you're on the bench and the parents are in the stands. They have an easier way to talk than you do to them, right? So, yeah. They're like, oh, well, because everybody's like, well, what so-and-so said. And so just communicating to them and educating them at the same time is important. But I think knowing the role that you are at the age you're at, and making sure that you're, thinking about this fundamental skills. And then, and one thing too is, don't deviate from a plan after your first day. You might have the same practice plan for three, 4 practices in a row.
Right.
Just make it so it's easy.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Just make it so it's easy to succeed, and then build on the success.
But if I can jump on that too, Mike, I want to say that I think you just made a great point that sometimes coaches come in, well, we worked on that. Well, okay. Think about how people learn. Like you said, you didn't know the alphabet in a day after one class, right? So I think what it is, and again, I'll use the younger levels as an example, but this goes all the way up, right? Let's just say I want to work on passing with the 8U team. I figure it's going to take a month or 2 before it really clicks. Right now, I'm not saying the only thing we work on at practice is passing, but I make sure that they understand we're working on passing for this reason. The head coach does a great job with this too. Here's 3 or 4 drills we're going to implement over the next month for passing. And you know what? When it clicked, it clicked. We saw it click in a weekend ago. But it's so important to break things down of, if you want to get to Z, you have to start with A. If you want to learn how to skate and take a shot, you need to know the mechanics of a shot. You need to know the mechanics of skating first. And as a coach, it's okay. And Mike, I find a lot of coaches have a problem with this. It's okay to rewind back a little bit. 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards is still moving forward, right? To learn and break down a skill set. So I think the other thing real quick before we move to the second one, and this is a conversation I've had with people, is, look, I'm a big fan of the ADM. I like ADM drills. I think what USA Hockey has done to create really a library of drills that any coach can pick from is a real asset. But it can't be just going through the motions of picking 3 or 4 drills and 5 or 6 drills and going out there. And one of the conversations I had recently was, look, would we rather do 6 drills okay or 4 drills really well? Right. So I know the attitude is always keep them moving. Don't let them stop, keep them moving. And I agree with that to a point, but I think it's worth taking the 5 minutes during the practice, maybe a minute every few shifts or whatever, to really just say, hey, come on in. Let me explain the why really quickly of why we're doing this. Right. And by the way, coaches, if you have time before the practice to do this, then you really can keep them moving the whole time to explain it. I used to do that with my teams. We'd have a 20-minute meeting where I'd go over every drill and why. But I'd rather do 4 drills really well, than 6 drills just okay. And I don't think that's a mentality that's shared enough. Again, I'm going to throw back to Mike one more time, Christie, before we move on. But because Mike, I want your thoughts on that, because you are the top tiered coach here. And I think a lot of coaches are told, no, it's always moving, never stopping. Pick your 6 drills and move on. Right.
Yeah. I don't really, I'm not a big fan of that either. I think it's, if as long as you have drills that are age appropriate and you can put the kids, if you're working on a passing skill and you can get your kids off the ice demonstrating that passing skill and the mechanics of passing, and then why you want to make those passes. We had a drill even with my 14U team the other day. The kids thought it was a warm-up drill. This warm-up drill, it's so long. And it was just a reiteration. It started from, post up on the half wall to the slot. slot to half wall across, slot to half wall across and back, slot to half wall across and back and back. It's all catch and shoot, catch and pass, catch and shoot, catch and pass, move your feet. All that kind of stuff was just building blocks. And then the night we're watching Harvard and Dartmouth, and they're playing, right, and in a game, and all of a sudden, my son's watching the game with me, and he's like, hey, that's our drill. That's our warm-up. That's the drill we were just doing. And it's the power play, right? It's catching and shooting, wall to top, low to high. Move your feet, turn your body, get your stick in an activated position. If you can explain that, you can explain it to an 8-year-old. 8-year-olds can understand, why am I passing this way? Why am I moving the puck to this area? If you can show them that off the ice, where it's quiet, there's no distractions, the other coach isn't screaming at his kids on the other side of the rink, mom and dad aren't giving the signs of what the kid should be doing. It eliminates so much distraction, and then you can get to the business of actually teaching the skill. I mean, that's and I wish we wouldn't deviate from how we educate our kids in school to how we educate our kids on the ice. It's the same thing. Show them something, speak to them, show them, demonstrate, let them go, regroup. Let's work on it again. And it might be weeks. So you can't work if you can't.
Had any signs? What I should be doing signs when I never had.
Oh
any.
my God! When my parents listen to this podcast, they'll be like, "Oh, you're talking about me, aren't you?" Yeah, I got kids sign languaging each other for their parents.
Oh, what's a popular one so I can learn it?
I don't know. I think it's kill the coach. I think it's kill the coach. Don't listen to the coach. Don't listen to the coach.
Oh man, I love it.
I'll do this one.
Oh, hey, you know what? I'm going to say this real quick.
All good. It's all good. I'm not going to bash the parents.
No, I'm going to say this. I'll say it for you, Mike, because I can. This is what I'm going to say. There's a great quote in the show Ted Lasso, where Ted says, it's another quote, but he says, "Be curious, not judgmental." All right. So parents, okay, I'm a parent too. Everyone here is a parent. If you're curious about why a coach is doing something, that's fine. You can ask the coach. You can have that conversation. If you're judgmental, time to volunteer to be a coach. All right. If you're going to judge everything a coach is doing, go coach. And if you don't have the time to coach, be more curious than judgmental. Okay.
Or just shut up about it.
Yeah. Well, see, Christie, this is why I love having you on the show. Just shut up last week. Just move on. Just love it. Love it. Let's keep going.
I'm in the first season of Ted Lasso. I'm just really enjoying it. So I can't wait for season 2. So I'm still going through
recommended viewing, season 1. Season 2 is a little bit of a different pace, but season 1 is 100% recommended viewing for everyone on this.
Very relatable too. If you're a hockey parent, you can really relate to a lot of what goes on there.
I literally was a coach in the UK. I feel like that's me, minus the mustache. Anyway, keep going.
So, all right. So that was a great discussion. Love that. Let's go on to tip number 2. And this is one I'm a huge fan of. So I'm really eager to hear you guys' take on this one. So here it is. Play them if you got them. So basic. So if they're good enough to make your team, they're good enough to play for your team. It's the coach's job to make sure that everybody's improves right from the onset, from the beginning of the year to the end. So if it doesn't happen, then you really need to reevaluate your role as a coach. You're not doing something right if the kid's not improving. Could be attitude too. I mean, there's a little blend there. But if the season, you should mix and match your lines, allow everybody an opportunity to be a part of the power play, part of the penalty killing units as the season hits its full stride. And then your number 1 power play and penalty killing units take shape. It's even more important to find enough ice time for all your players. Yes. Let me hear what you guys think.
Well, Mike, I'll jump in first on this one, but you have to jump in first on the next one. That's my deal. I'm always taking the initiative. But I think this one's age restrictive, Christie. So I think in the younger levels, and I'll say anything U12 down, I completely agree with this because it's all developmental at that stage. And I think that, it's, again, you look at the U8 team, like if they've never played defense before, they've never played goalie before. So it is about exposure. I think once you get above that U12, the conversation shifts slightly. And all I mean by that is I do think everyone should play, but I think establishing roles is actually more important than just throwing anybody out there. Keeping in mind too, look, the article is called Talking About Practice. So I think if you can make sure the kids are practicing this stuff outside of games, yes, everyone should have the opportunity to try something just to learn. When you get into a game in a competitive scenario, especially, again, when you get 15, 16, 17, you want to start identifying the roles and the skill sets and the abilities that kids have and how they play into each other. Right. So again, something the NHL does really well is understanding how fourth lines are supposed to work. Right. And the understanding from those fourth line players exactly what their job is. Now, again, you go to a high school student, it's a little different, but I think it's important to have a role, make sure that they're getting experience in that role. And should they want to expand that role at practice, it's a wonderful place to do this. If a kid comes up to me, if I'm a high school coach and says, look, I really want to try the power play, I really want to try the PK. The head coach should have enough humility to say, you know what? I like that you're being aggressive about this. I'm going to try you out, but you have to trust my judgment. And if you're not ready yet, we'll work on it. That's kind of where I see it going. So there's always that age split. Again, you guys might disagree with me on that one. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about practice, right? So if you're good enough to make the team, you're good enough to make my team, you're going to play.
Right.
If you're not going to play, then I'm not picking you for the team. And it's even the frustrating piece about, why we cut kids after 6 months. I mean, you really know a player after 6 months. If you picked a player and 6 months later you're cutting them for another 5 players, I don't know. I just think it's a horrible part of our game. But but you have to get kids involved. And what, I think the frustrating thing for me is when you see a youth hockey practice and they're working on the power play, it's the same 5 kids and the other kid there's another 12 sitting on the bench waiting. You've got to get those kids involved. You have to have a plan. Then if you're going to have your 5 kids on the power play, and that's who your kids are going to be, then you have to have a plan to make sure those other kids are active. They're not waiting. Because the first thing you'll yell as a coach is, you better pay attention. You're never going to get the spot. And the kid's like, I'm never going to get the spot anyway. You've never even played me in a game. Like, why would I be motivated? And this goes to the high school level too. And I mean, one of my mentors and one of the idols that I love from USA Hockey side, from hockey coaching is a guy, Lou Varro, right? And Lou, even when he's spoken to us in the past, it's always at the IIHF, Olympics, World Championships, Junior Championships. You're on my team, you are going to play. If I make a concerted effort to get you off the bench and on the ice. Now, what role you're going to be in, that's up to you. That's a conversation we're going to have. But if I'm picking you on the team, you're going to play. Same thing for goalies, right? You have your starting goal. I mean, the fact that you have a starting goalie and a backup goalie in youth hockey is absurd to me. It's an absurdity to me. I mean, imagine you have your starting goalie and then he gets hurt right before the playoffs, and then what are you going to go? You're going to go to your backup that hasn't played all year and go, hey, we're with you. You got to be a teammate now. Right. And the kid's like, who the hell are you? I don't even like you. Like, I haven't even played.
That is such a great point.
So it's such a horrible thing to see these kids. And it's like, and then you don't know. You have to give them opportunities. Is it easy? It is not easy. It's not easy to organize your practices and make sure everybody gets in early and everybody gets a touch. But I love that idea of finding those roles. If you have your power play kids, then put out 4 kids out there and give them a goal. Guys, you need to kill every power play there is here. You're never going to be on the power play, but you got to kill the power. You got to be my best penalty killer. Find your role, and yet next thing you know, you find your players that step up and get gritty and get to a place where they want to get into that position. And I think it's good and healthy for the whole team to understand that everyone's going to play, and it's good and healthy for a coach to present that to the players, that everyone has an equal opportunity for ice time here.
And
great. I love it.
I want to reiterate real quick too, that having a role, the role should not be sitting on the bench. All right. And I don't think I clearly said that. Like, having a role does not have anything to do with ice time. Everyone should play. But when you get older, you should know that role. Here's a great one, coaches and parents. This is something that's underestimated. You talk about how to become a great scorer, right? I'm always amazed when I have these conversations, Christie, because you got to practice, you got to do this. We have this tool. How you become a great scorer? Find a great goalie to shoot on. How you become a great penalty killer? Practice within a great power play. How you become a great defenseman? Learn how to play offense. Vice versa. How do you become a great offenseman? Learn how to play great defense. Sometimes the best teachers are right in front of you. And don't get me wrong, tools of the trade are awesome. There's so many tools out there now, way more than when I was growing up, to make you better at hockey. But the truth is this, it's competition. One of the teams I was working on, we had the best goalie in the league. Well, our scoring percentage went up and up and up. And our goalie used to get mad at me. And I said, you got to understand, I'm going to have them challenge you more than anyone because you're the best goalie in the league. They're only going to get better shooting on you. Once that clicked, I'll say begrudgingly, but it clicked. All of a sudden he challenged everyone at practice, right? And he teased them if they didn't score. What do you think happened? So coaches, especially in youth hockey, right? You want to make great PKs, put them out there with your top power play, not just your best PK. Also, we're going to talk about this in a minute, Christie. Mike said it. What happens when someone gets injured, right? And you have no one to fill the role. You better be practicing. Go ahead, Christie.
All right. So we've got, we're going to move on to tip number 3, and it's talking about practice. A right time for everything. This is a good one too. Early in the season may not be the right time to work on your 5-on-3 power play. Divide the season into 4 quarters. Listen, be patient. Divide it into 4 quarters. A heavy diet of skill development, positional play early on, focusing on habits and concepts. Later on in the season, mix in a little more work on special teams, situational play. Also be conscious of what's going on in the lives of your players. For example, if it's a heavy time for exams or schoolwork, lighten up the load and practice. What's wrong with that?
Right. So, all right. So I'm going to be, I'm a little on as far as the practice side goes. I think the power play penalty, I'm just at the youth hockey level, honestly, maybe it's 14U even. And lower. You shouldn't really be spending more than what 8% on the power play penalty kill, and it all depends on how much time you have. Most of us have twice a week for an hour a week. I mean, that's the majority of youth teams, right? Maybe you're lucky you have 3 days a week where you have like a skills night or something like that. So if you're working on the skills and giving the kids the opportunity to work on power play skills, penalty kill skills, which are passing, shooting, skating, back checking, forechecking, stick position, body position, doing all those things. But then to our first point, making sure that you're conveying that information to the kids that all of these skills that we're working on are going to help you with these other aspects of the game. I think that's important. And for most of us in the country, knowing that workload is really important. Knowing that, I got, 8 or 9 kids playing soccer, a bunch of kids playing football, a bunch of kids doing other, fall sports. And then allowing those seasons to end before the hockey season really gets underway. And then understanding that at the end of the season, we're asking our kids to perform at their best. Some of them are coming from lacrosse and baseball and, double practices and triple practices. So we really do have to know, our market and our teams and our kids. And it's all of us, all coaches, parents, hockey organizers, hockey directors, schedulers. You have to understand these are children that even though you might only have 2 hockey games in a day, they might also have, we played a team this past weekend that their team had, 9 of their kids played in a lacrosse tournament the day before. They probably had like 5 or 6 games in one day. That's puts a toll on those kids' bodies. And, you as a hockey coach and director need to understand those ebbs and flows of the season to make sure your kids are, staying healthy and involved and passionate and, engaged.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this, Mike. It's you got to be conscious of what's their surroundings, right? Right? Like what's
because
going
we just
on.
think they're playing hockey with us. Like, oh, my schedule is the most important piece of what's going on here, right, guys?
Right.
And like, no, you're just like one piece of my 48 hours this weekend.
Well, like you said it, Mike. It's your 2 hours of the week. It might be this might take up 20 hours of your week, but this is only 2 hours of my week. Right. So like again, you got to be conscious of your surroundings and what's going on and kind of where you fit in the puzzle. And the other thing too is like I said, this goes back to number 1 is you got to break down the goals to what you need, right? So speaking about the power play again, like should you be in a position to even practice the power play, right? It's like, do they have the basic skills needed to accomplish a successful power play? Because like, honestly, if you can get your guys into an umbrella at whatever, U15, but they can't pass, it doesn't matter. If they can't shoot, it doesn't
but it's
matter.
funny about that. So I probably vacillated a little bit on this too, because sometimes by having that structure of a penalty kill and power, like I'll have a lot of penalty kills, not at the younger levels, because it's not that big a deal to me about giving up power play goals, at 8U and 10U.
Right.
But it's a bigger deal at 18U. So when you don't have the skill, when you can't teach the passing, the structure then is maybe something you work on more. Maybe, people are like, oh my God, your kids are like robots. Yeah, but it's the only way we're going to win because we don't have the skill. So at the older levels, we have to have structure. We have to have, pieces in play that you're more of a chessboard guy because you're really not developing anymore. Unless you're like in the AHL and you're going to the NHL or you're in junior hockey going to college. But if you're a kid that's playing midget hockey or high school hockey, and that's the end of your career.
I believe
that
it's
coach-
18U now, Mike. We can't say midget anymore.
Right. If you're playing U18 in some places in the, I was just at a referee clinic this weekend in USA Hockey. I was having a little fun because all their paperwork had U8 and U10. And I'm like, I thought we were all part of the same organization. We got to get on the same page here. So bottom line is when you're 18U hockey and it's the final, probably, piece of a player's career in the season you're in, then structure, yes, it really does become important because it eliminates the need to have skill.
Well, and hopefully they'd have the basic skill sets built up at that point. I agree with you 100%. One quote I'm thinking of, and I don't mind turning to the NHL sometimes or professional hockey for answers. But you'll hear, remember Jaromir Jagr used to say, well, I don't have when I get to my mid-season legs, or when I get to this point and this is activated, at the NHL level, again, for established players, we're not talking guys coming up for the first time in the show, but they know their bodies. They know that, the first quarter of the season is different than the last quarter of the seasons. They know they're going to be dealing with injuries. They understand the patience that comes with playing an 82 game season. But when you apply this down to the youth level, like when you come in, Mike, at the beginning of the year, like it's just time to get going again. They might not have skated all summer or even if that, it's just, you gotta ease into it the right way. And there's this belief, Mike, we talked about this on the show, Christie too, like, oh, they gotta be playing all year round. No, you want them playing other sports. You want them to come in there a little bit out of whack, right? So that you can start to, it's almost like a fresh canvas, right? So you got to gauge that. It takes time to get into seasonal form. Again, look, young kids are in athletic form all the time, but you got to gauge this on the level you're at with what you got. And like it says, there's a right time for everything. Like if you're too far ahead, and this goes back to what we said earlier, don't be afraid to take a step back. I can't stand when coaches say, we should be here by now. Well, you're not. Okay. So you got to deal with that reality.
That's Bill Parcells, right? You are who your record says you are.
Right.
You are who you are. I mean, we're a AAA team. Well, we're not.
Yeah.
So we are who we are. We're who we're playing. So you can't just manufacture who you are. You have to determine who you are based off of where you are.
Will it into existence.
Yeah, like I paid for the AAA team though. I get it. But
you pay for a college education too. You're not guaranteed a job afterwards. No one is.
Right. All right.
We're flying right through these. We're already up to tip number 4, guys. And this one takes me back to my band days because my band instructor, I was in the concert band. He would always say this right before every practice. Very simply, practice makes perfect. Woohoo! All right. So you may be at the mercy of your association scheduler, which is true when it comes to adhering to the recommendation 3-to-1 practice to game ratio. Make the most of the time you have. That's so important because the time is so precious. And now we're all competing for ice time. It's really difficult. So sometimes you have to find that you've been allocated only half the ice for a practice session. That's okay. Can create challenges with your team concepts, such as neutral zone regroup. So just be creative, employ small area games to replicate those game-like scenarios. And I remember a couple times when we were at one rink that there were so many teams competing for ice time. We only had half the ice for practice, and our coaches always tried to get creative. It's challenging, but that's the hand you're dealt. You got to deal with it, right?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Mike. I want you to.
So I'm a big proponent of, this practice makes perfect is great, right? But if you have to find a way to empower your kids to practice. You can't go to 2 hours a week and expect it to get better. I mean, we do it at the very lowest levels, right? When you see kids doing learn to play with the NHL right now, which is an unbelievable program, and Lee's talked about this a number of times. And you pay $300 for a year, and you get all the equipment for free, and you skate every day. But you have to find ways to empower those kids to do other things at home, because that practice can't take place for 2 hours. It needs to take place for 8 hours, 9 hours. This is the reason why kids read at night, right? And they don't just read in school. You have to find other ways to empower those kids. So I think us as youth hockey coaches, we can take this technology we have. I mean, COVID, for me, it opened up the door to so many other ways to interact with your kids that normally would be like, I'm not getting on a Zoom call and working on video. It's just like, don't we have to go to a classroom and sit in a room and, the two kids can put their hoodies up and go to sleep in the back. And the kids that, want to listen will listen. And the other kids that you think are listening are just, the Xanax hasn't kicked in yet or something. But so they, I think what we're in here is in an opportunity to tell our kids, listen, this is what we're working on in these 2 hours I have you, but I also have this assignment I need you to do. Now, I say it to my parents all the time and my kids, if they're not home working out on their own, like, deliberate self, finding how to pass and how to shoot, or they're not students of the game. They're not watching the game. They're not seeing video. They're not taking in this stuff that we're doing away from the rink. They're just not going to progress. And that's nobody's fault. It's just, that's who they are, right? You have kids that, if you have kids that are voracious readers, you can't make a non-reader into a reader. If you have a kid that loves reading, you're going to keep feeding them books and feeding them books and feeding them books. You're not going to take books away from them. And I think that's the same thing with our athletes. If we can find ways to inspire them to go home and practice, we're going to give them more. We're going to give them more. We're going to give them more. And the kids that don't take the more are just going to be the kids that don't progress. And I think so, using your time in practice, having a practice plan, sharing it, getting your parents on board, getting extra help out in the ice, doing off ice work, doing home assignments, all those kind of things take a lot of work. The great thing about this article, probably, I don't even know what it says it, but you look in USA Hockey Magazine and your articles, there's so many resources out there for us as coaches, especially us, the volunteer coaches and, the mom and dads that are getting out there just for that 2 hours a week to take and extract all this free stuff and send it out to our kids. And the ones that take it and can absorb it are the kids we want to keep motivating and working with. And the kids that don't, they don't. Right. And that's okay too. Hopefully they'll be, good lawyers and doctors and plumbers and electricians.
You got to work at that too, though.
We can use that. We can have those relationships later on. But I think it's just, again, it's an opportunity to have kids do other things off the ice and away from the rink that are going to help them become better players. And that's practice.
I'll say this, there's levels to this one, right? So from a pure hockey level or sport level of high level sport, I subscribe to the saying that you're going to practice hard so the games are easy. All right. And I really believe that if you can make your practices fun, but competitive and fast paced and informative and really make the practice where, same level of effort as a game, the games actually become easy because, you'll be thankful when you run into another team like that, but most of the time it makes your life easier. I also am a big believer in muscle memory and that you have to do things over and over and over and over and over and over again. Right. And I think that there's too much of, okay, I did that drill, let's move on. Well, okay, that's great that you did the drill, but how did you learn to roll your wrists? How did you learn to transfer your weight? Like you do it over and again. You can get creative with this. Now, this is where I said there's levels to this. Now, I was a bit of a maniac when it came to hockey training when I was growing up. I loved every iota of information or training that I could do. I just lived it, right? I remember at one point I used to walk around my high school. I saw the basketball team and the football team, they used to carry the balls around the school, right? They, football player have a ball all the time. And I said, well, there's got to be something for hockey. So I went home, I cut one of my old wooden shafts and I walked around school. I'm not kidding. This isn't a joke. I walked around school with a hockey shaft in my hand all day, rolling my wrist all day through school. In fact, sometimes when the teacher wasn't looking, I had my hand in my backpack doing it. Right. Because I needed to improve on that. And like, again, I was that kid. I don't know how else to say it. So you can get creative with this stuff. But there has to be a will. I love that you both laugh at me for that. There has to be a will.
There's something wrong with you. There's definitely something wrong.
Listen, there's a reason I'm on this show with you two.
No, one weird kid.
My point, but there was a will there, right? There was a will. Like, that's the other part of it.
You can't walk around with a hockey shaft in school anymore, though. So
I beg to differ. Again, it wasn't a whole stick. It was about. Let's see, it was about 10 inches long. If anybody asked,
you got to get through the metal detectors.
Yeah. Well, you're right. You can't use a carbon fiber stick. You have to get a Sherwood 50-30. But you can get creative. Look, the other thing too is if there's a will. I mean, this has never been more true. If there's a will, there's a way. I remember, Mike, I gotta say this. I remember early days of the internet, just early Google looking for anything hockey related because there wasn't much there in the beginning, right? Like articles, anything. I was just wanted to be around the game, VHS tapes. it's unlimited now, unlimited resources, right? And if you're willing to pay, I mean, the resources get unbelievable if you find something reputable, but most of the stuff you can find for free. So if there's a will, there's a way. Parents, coaches, players out there listening, for sure.
Yeah. And I have this conversation with mostly, you know what, the conversation I have is mostly with the guys and girls, mostly guys, because that's who I'm around the most in the hockey world, that played high level college hockey, pro hockey, really, really high level players that are now coaching their kids. And they're, I gotta get my kid to do this. And I really want to give him this opportunity. And I want him to do this. I go, let's think about what you did. Like, what did you do? Your parent, like my parents had to drag me in the house.
Right.
Like they had to, you had to say, you cannot be out again. You cannot go to the rink again. It is forbidden.
Street lights are on. Get inside.
You are not allowed to go down and break into the rink and skate again at night. You cannot do that. That's that's forbidden. And we're begging our kids to work. So think about that, right? If you're begging your kid to go to a hockey practice, if you're begging your kid to train, it's not in the cards for them. It just isn't. So, but at the same time, if we can, as a hockey society, create practices that are so much fun, that kids want to learn and want to embrace going home and grabbing a stick, and we can find ways to inspire them and fight Xbox and Fortnite and other distractions the kids have in my mind. Like I call it distraction. It's probably just being a normal kid. But if you're distracted from sport, lacrosse and football and hockey, then you got to find other ways to make that sport so enjoyable that they want to do what you did, Lee. They want to be around the game. They want to explore the game. But what we do is we beat it out of kids. I mean, some teams right now are in their 7th tournament. It's October.
Right.
I mean, it's like, we have a game. That's my biggest pet peeve is hearing youth hockey coaches talk about the grind, right? The grind of hockey. I go, the grind. Fun. It's not supposed to be a grind. This is supposed to be the most fun part of what you do. This is what you do
to get away from the grind.
The grind happened. Like, why are you telling me you're getting in a car for 7 hours and going to Buffalo and playing a 40-minute game? Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, for Christie, it's like 2 hours, right? But I mean, I think that whole idea of practice has to come from, you need to inspire the kids to want to practice. And then us as parents want to give them the tools to practice. And it can't all be, listen, kids in other societies find ways, like burlap bags, right? And stuffed with straw. They find a way to practice. So I think if our kids want, there's a will, there's a way. Your kids are gonna perform if it's something they love to do.
Yeah, and I've seen that with my son. We put him in every sport, kicking and screaming, bringing him to, I want to do this, I want to do karate. Sign him up for karate. 6 weeks later, you had to drag him to karate practice. Football just lost interest. Same thing with soccer and basketball. He tried all the sports, kind of lost interest, but hockey, he was obsessed. He's out in the driveway constantly hitting on the net, grabbing his little sister, putting her in the net, shooting on her, So, yeah, I mean, you definitely see it. And so you kind of have to feel what they like and just go with that too.
Yeah, that's hard for parents. That's hard for parents, right? It's hard for somebody to say, like me, like I joke around with my kids, I want you to explore everything, but basketball, you're not allowed to play basketball. I don't care if you love it. I don't care if you're 6'9". I can't watch it. I just can't watch it. So you cannot participate in that, but I'm joking. But I just you want your kids to gravitate towards the things you like. And it's so hard to say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You like karate
and that happened
more than hockey?
With hockey. I know. Yeah. My son was born during the Super Bowl. So I thought his destiny was to play football. And he showed me that I didn't know anything about hockey. So I'm like, what do you mean you want to play hockey? I don't even know anything about this sport.
And look at you now.
Right.
Look where you're at now. Yeah, like I'll say this too. I've told this story on the show before, so I'll tell it briefly. I remember practicing outside in the garage, and I used to want my father to tell me to go practice. And he just came up to me one day and he said, "Lee, if you want this enough, I won't have to tell you." And he never had to tell me again. But there's a deeper thing here than hockey too, friends. And we got to talk about this is when your kid finds that passion, and it might be sports, it might be spanned, it might be something totally different, right? you gotta cultivate the passion in what they love, right? Whether you agree with it or not. And whether it makes, so again, Mike, you said it too. Studies show that, look, gaming is not bad for you, but doing it 12 hours a day can be detrimental, right? So like anything, you gotta cultivate it in the right way. But yeah, when it comes to practicing, Mike, I agree with you. You gotta make it fun. You gotta make sure the kids are engaged. Another thing I wanted to tap on with this real quick. As I said, I had a great coach that did this for me when I was younger. Is how you approach kind of homework assignments after practice, depending on the age, right? My attitude has always been, okay, look, obviously at the very, very top levels, if you give a player something to work on, they have to work on it. That's why you're at a top level. And most of the time that's going to happen. But I find that, it's not optional homework. I don't want to call it that, but on my team, we got a parent, like I have a kid who's having a hard time stopping on his left foot. Right. And his mother came up to, well, what can we do to work on it at home? I said, that's great. I can give you some things to work on from home. And it kind of spawned on me, like, I could probably be doing this with more of the kids, whether they do it or not. I have to kind of be okay with, but as a coach, as an educator, am I even giving them the tools of, hey, you should go home and work on this, or here's a couple of things you can, parents, you can work on with your kids at home. Here's a quick one that I'll be vulnerable for a minute. Like, I'm having a hard time. So my son's enjoying the game, but I'm having a hard time working with him at home. He doesn't respond to me well. It turns into kind of a little bit more heated than I want it to be. So you got to remember, like the game has been my whole life. I love the game. I'm very aware that if that's not for him, that's okay. It's always been my thing. I don't want to make him think he wants to do that. But his mom got involved and his mom practices with him now. And I'm totally okay with that. It's not a competitive thing for me. Right. But so what I do is I told my son's mother, my wife, I tell her what to work on with him, and she does, right? She's never played hockey in her life, but that's the cool part about it, right? That's the cool dynamic. He's responding to her. He's getting the information, but if I didn't give the information as a coach, am I really doing my job? And again, Mike, you said this too. It's like, it's 2 hours a week and you're spending 20 hours on it or whatever. As a coach, you're thinking about it all the time. How much are you spending on the after practice stuff of, hey, if we could all take 20 minutes, doesn't have to be that much time really, 20 minutes at home to work on rolling your wrists or to work on pointing the toe of the stick at the net when you shoot or whatever, right? That's part of this as well, is to make that available, whether they do it or not, is to make it available. Because here's the deal. If one kid really, but if 3 of your 10 kids do it, that's great at the very young levels, right? It's great, right? It's made a difference. That's coaching.
Yeah, no, and I think that comes into the whole conversation about practice.
Talk about practice.
If practice isn't fun, if it's not engaging, if it's not inspiring, if it's not something they want to do, they're not going to do it. And if you force feed them these responsibilities, then you as a coach have to figure out different ways to inspire them, because it's not working. So I got to find a different way to get them to do what that I would like them to do. But listen, the reality is, you're just going to work with some athletes that don't do it. Right. And they're never going to be those players. And I think that's why, this is why elite teams and AAA teams exist, right? Because the parents that think their kids are the ones that are carrying hockey sticks around all the time and shooting when they're not being asked to shoot, or setting up elaborate stick handling zones in their basements and driveways on their own, are the ones that gravitate towards each other. And the ones that don't, the parents put them in power skating, stick handling, everything. They're trying to catch them up. But the fact is, the heart doesn't want it.
The will's not there. Yeah.
So it's not going to get there. You could give them all the lessons in the world. And listen, I used to hate those kids. I used to hate the kid that I know never worked out, never ran, never did anything, and would kick my butt in a race or preseason dry land. I'm like, son of a bitch. I said, this kid just, he does nothing, but he's just a great athlete. And he had his own passion. He's like, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do it. And I'm working my butt off, but to get to that level. But there was other kids that didn't do anything. And guess what? They were last. And that's who they were. So the practices, to me, like, that's why I think at the youth level, you got to find a way to have just engage the kids and make them want to be at the glass. And that Zamboni comes off, they're fighting to get on the ice.
Right.
And if you can create that kind of environment, then you're in great shape. Then you're having fun with the kids, and then you can build on all that other stuff: power play, penalty kill, and all the other.
This is why this show is therapy for me. Like I'm realizing the more we do this, that I'm fortunate to be the youngest like coach here with the youngest child, because like I get this great advice every week that I get to bring to practice. But like you said, Mike, this show and both of you, it's probably the reason I was able to kind of step away from coaching my own kid at home, right? Because look, let's be honest. If I'm not careful, there could be ego attached to that for me. There could be, this is my job kind of attitude. And, it's like, no, I just want him to have fun. He's having fun with his mom. I stepped away, right? And the last thing, Mike, you tapped on this is that, look, there's a difference between being lazy and not loving something, all right? So if a kid's lazy, you got a parent. You got a coach, right? You don't want your kid to be lazy. But like you said, Mike, if the kid's just not into hockey, I can imagine, especially if they're older, you put a lot of time yourself into this as a parent, that can probably be very painful and frustrating if a kid just goes, I don't want to do it anymore. I can imagine that. Right. And I might have to deal with that one day, to be fair, but it's really not about us, right? It's about them. Right. So if they don't want to do it and they have another interest they want to pursue, obviously every situation is different, but you got to take all the ego out of it, all of that out of it. You can't force your kid to do something they don't want to do or they don't have a passion for. Again, every situation is different. I'm being very literal with that, right? There are going to be situations where a kid just doesn't want to do it because they're 14 and pubescent and life is going on. That's different than what I'm talking about. But, it's so important that we cultivate the understanding, especially right now in society, of you're passionate about this, pursue it. You have to work at it. It's not just going to come into your lap, right? And that there are people out there that will want to help you, and you got to work together. Like those are lessons that we don't talk about. Again, last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up about this. I interview high level people all the time. You two are high level. On the other shows I do, I get to talk to some of the top people in sports, in business. What's amazing to me is when I ask them, what are the 4 or 5 traits that separate the top level athletes at the pro level or the top level business people? It's never great slap shot. It's never the best skater I've ever seen. It's they have great character. They really love the game, right? They really care about their community and their teammates. That becomes the separator, right? So wherever your child can apply those types of things, it's probably the direction you want to steer them towards. Might not be hockey. If you're listening to the show, you hope it's hockey. I get that. But it might not be hockey. It might be something else. Cultivate their ability to learn and love something and work towards it. Because we all know life's not fair. Anyway, I'm on a soapbox right now. I'm going to step down. I'm going to let
one quick thing. I do wish I had this show when I was just starting out. I would have avoided so much angst. Seriously, this is such a good guide, especially for parents who are just starting out in hockey. It's really intimidating, right? Especially for like me. You didn't know anything about the sport, and it terrified you when you saw how much equipment was involved in the practices Christie, and the travel.
Did you just call me your little brother? Am I the youngest? Did you guys just call me the youngest brother?
Oh, and the other thing, I was listening to NPR radio on my way to Long Island to watch my daughter play, and I know you were saying that all the characteristics which separate great hockey players from average hockey players, and we'll have to get this guy on who did this study, who said it's really has to do with birth dates.
Yes,
when you were born. Like, really? Seriously?
Yeah,
it was so funny. I just had to throw that in there. Anyway,
we're
whipping through these. We deliver on our promises. We promised 5 tips. We've been through 4, had great discussions. So drum roll, please. Let's get on to tip number 5. Plan for the future. Let me repeat that. Plan for the future. What do we mean by that? It means injuries and illnesses, and boy, am I seeing that this season, are part of every team's season. That's why it's important to get everybody involved early in the season.
Right.
If you don't improve your entire team, how do you expect a 4th line player to step up and contribute at a crucial point in the season? A lot of coaches will tell you that winning seasons and championships take a backseat to seeing a former player years down the road. And he or she tells you how much you help them both as a player and a person. And you never know what can happen during the season. You may have all your lines set, and all of a sudden, kid gets COVID, another kid gets a concussion, another kid's out with mono. You have no idea.
Well, if they get
So you better
COVID, the whole
develop
team's
those
out.
Players.
The whole team's out if they get COVID.
Not necessarily. It
That's
depends
fair.
on how they get it. 'Cause
That's
we had
true.
a situation where a player got tested. That player wasn't around any other player, so it was just her that had to isolate. So it depends. So yeah, you got to develop everybody.
It's true.
Right?
Mike, you go first on this one. I agree.
Yeah, no, well, I think that goes back to the kind of the whole premise of the practicing and the season planning and, building your teams. And I probably fall on the side of, we have to be really conscious of this at the, I'm coaching 14U level, and, and my 8-year-old obviously is playing, cross ice, which, injuries and lineups, and that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, I think that's where you're really getting everybody involved anyway. So it's hopefully a lot of interchangeable parts there. And if you're missing your top goal scorer at that level, it shouldn't really affect everything you do. But at the higher levels, 14U, 16U, 18U, lineups, and you pick teams based off of players, right? You picked your teams. Hopefully, if you're coaching at that level, you're picking teams, not just okay, 1 through 16, you're on the team. They're picking kids that fit within certain roles and certain expectations you want for your lineup. And when you miss one or two, and I see this at the youth level, and it's so frustrating to me because I don't think I've ever accepted the fact that when you join a high level team, that you commit totally to that high level team. Like and again, that's my problem, right? That what do you mean you're missing practice or again, or, because you miss my practice, you're literally missing a ton of information. I mean, you're missing building blocks that now we've moved on from, and you're behind. You just are. You've missed big portions of us building our program and what we're trying to do. So I think that, as you get to these higher levels, you can't miss opportunities, to be with your team, because you are building for the future. The building blocks can't occur unless the formation of that starts at the beginning. And now if pieces start falling off, you lose a defenseman. You have to make a winger into a D into a winger, a third line, gritty, hard-nosed player into your first line centerman. Whatever it is, it is imperative to plan. And that's why I'm definitely an advocate for bigger rosters at the higher levels, because you're at any given time, because now it's not fair the other way, right? Now, all of a sudden you're into week 4 and you went from a team of 18 kids to 8 very easily. I mean, you look at you do survey a Bantam team, or, 12U teams and 14U teams and 16U teams. When you look at, man hour or player hours lost, there's a lot in youth hockey. And the only way to make sure that you can be an advocate for kids sitting out with concussions or letting injuries fully heal is to have the number, because you can't have the pressure of he's close, so let's get him back out there. Let that player completely heal. They're going to live a long life. They don't need nagging injuries when they're 35 years old because you played them in an extra tournament on a weekend with a broken thumb that they didn't need to play with. And I think, that takes planning for the future. It takes planning your roster out. And then I think the hardest part of it is convincing your parents that when the bench is full, that you're going to try to make it fair. But the reason why we have so many kids is so when we do run into these problems, which we will, and we don't want to be, but we're going to run into them, that we have a lineup every single weekend that could go out there and perform.
Mike, my lower lumbar and left shoulder are agreeing with you 100% right now. I'm around that age you were talking about, a little older, but I also want to say, Mike, too, just real quick, I wish I had a coach like you when I was growing up. I had good coaches, but I was going to say this to the audience. Mike's not cocky. He's that good. I wanted to say that, like the way he says things when you miss one of my practices, you really put the time in. I'm complimenting you on purpose. Thanks. Because you kind of set the bar for me of, how prepared you are, how seriously you take this, and how much crap you take for it sometimes too. And from parents and other coaches, like anything else in politics, but you really, this is your life's work, which I love, outside your children. Building on the plan for the future thing, again, I'm going to use the pro hockey levels as an example. And I'll pose this as a question for the audience. When you look at an NHL roster, and this is, in my opinion, this is a fair comparison to youth hockey, right? Let's just say you have, 3 really strong lines, right? 3 really strong lines, and your top line right winger, sick, injured, whatever, they're out for the game. I always say, well, what do you do? And I get more often than not, well, okay, you move the second line winger up to the first line, you move third line winger to the second line, fourth line. No. Why would you break up the other lines? You move your fourth line winger or the player you bring in to the first line. But they're the bottom line winger. Why? That's the correct way to do it. All right. You don't mess up your entire lineup because one person's out. All right. Now listen, I'll tell you this right now. You get a lot of kids injured or a lot of kids sick. It's really hard. It's really hard. It's hard to coach that. The odds are not in your favor in that scenario. No matter how prepared you are. I'm seeing this right now with the team I'm working with in Europe. Lots of injuries, lots of things going on that we can't control. And we're suffering for it, right? We're managing it, but we're suffering for it. Sometimes there is a hump you can't get over, right? But when it comes to planning for the future, if you're doing it well, I don't want to say right. If you're doing it well, most players will be able to step into any situation effectively. They might not be great at it, but they'll be able to step into it effectively, right? You don't want to break up your second, third, fourth line if you can help it. You want to replace if needed for the time being, right? And if you're training players well, they'll be able to step in and have some sort of form of performance. I always turn to football with this. Like, second, third, fourth string players, right? Like, think about that. I mean, I remember watching the Eagles a few years ago. Our offensive line got decimated. We had third stringers in, but they were ready to go. Were they as good as the first stringers? No. Did they know their job? Yes. Did they do the best they could? Yes. Did they get better every game? Yes. Because they were put in a position to succeed, right? And the expectation, that's the other thing. The expectations were there, right? So I think planning for the future, absolutely. This is why it's so important to go back to number 2, play them if you got them. You got to make sure that everyone's getting that ice time. They understand what they're doing. Again, another example, is we one of the teams I'm coaching, we have 2 teams, right? We have a top team and a lower team. This is the professional ranks, right? Well, the lower team learns the skills and the tactics we're using on the top team as well, so that when we call them up, they're ready to go. I don't want to pull someone up and be like, here's the system. And they go, oh, I've never played that before. That doesn't make any sense. Again, little different at that level. But when you look at a youth team, it's the bottom half of your lineup, we'll just say skill wise. I don't like to use that terminology. Are you putting them in a position so they have a clue? Because if you're not doing that, that's on you as the coach. All right. If you're Mike, you said that great example earlier of the coach who's practicing the power play, yelling at the kids on the bench, you better pay attention to this or you're not going to learn it. Get them on the other side of the ice with another coach practicing it. What are you doing? Right. Making them sit on the bench.
Run the same thing. Run
on the other side.
Right. Run the same damn thing.
And then if you really want to do it good, interchange players. If you feel like your top power play guys got it, throw in the other guys too. Mix it up a little bit. Because guess what? Christie, this is the point. You might get an injury and one of those players might actually have to jump into that situation. And that's it's also fun. It's creative and fun. So again, I'm getting a little loud. Sorry. Excited. It's Monday morning. I had my shake before I get on, but that's it. There are these stupid BS assumptions that we make. It's like, let's move up all the wingers up a line. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Right. Same thing happens on defense. The top 2D, one of the top 2D goes down. You don't move the other. You move the bottom D up. All right. And again, look,
or you move a player into that position that's suited for that role better.
Right.
And so sometimes like you have a good line, and you're like, wow, now that the injury happened, it actually opens up an opportunity for a player to go into this line that I didn't think was there before.
Right.
But if you know it's a short-term injury, then what's the best thing to do? You inject the player into a position that's going to temporarily hold that spot. It's almost like the rule. You'll see it at the NHL all the time, right? If your starting goalie gets hurt, no matter how good the other goalie plays, they didn't lose their role because they got hurt. Now they could play out of that role again, but most coaches are going to give that goalie the chance to come back in from where they were from the injury. Right. And earn that, because they did earn it, the injury, but other kids, other players get to jump in and say, okay, here's my spot. Right. It's an injury. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened. And now I'm just as confident to play. And what I love about the teams, when you see the other goalie now supporting that goalie and how happy they are that another athlete on their team is succeeding, those are such healthy, vibrant teams and great cultures, right? And at the youth level, I don't think we do enough of that. And personally, I think, I think we I think we overschedule, under roster. We don't allow these things to naturally occur where players can earn spots and move into positions, because we just don't have the room to do it. And parents want, it's all about how much ice am I getting in a game, and they don't value the amount what you can do in practice. If I could roster 26 players on my 14U team, I would do it in a heartbeat, because my practices would be deadly. Like you would not survive practice,
right?
Because it would be so competitive. But I'm limited, right? Because now you only can have 15 players, 16 players. You got to find a way for everyone to get equal time, which is hard. And really the kids don't learn to play roles. It's hard at the youth level, because you don't have that depth. When you're at high school, prep school, college, you have that depth. You have that opportunity to look out and you watch a college program and you go, holy crap, there's like 27 players out there practicing, and they're all competing for the chance to play on Friday night.
Committed.
Right. And I think that's a huge difference between youth hockey and the higher, when we say higher levels hockey. But
I'm going to take this outside hockey again for just one more minute, because I always like to expunge these lessons. Parents, coaches, look, we all love hockey here. We all get lost in the game, but there's a bigger life lesson at play here. All right. How many of you have been in your office? This has happened to me at different points. I've had to do this. And someone comes up to you and goes, listen, you're doing a great job. I've got to give you this responsibility on top of everything else you're getting. You're not going to get paid anymore. I need you to do this responsibility. Well, I can tell when I do that who's played sports, because they go, okay, tell me about it. Let's learn about it. We'll figure it out. We'll do it. I haven't played sports, but that's not my job. That's not my job. All right. And you never learn to deal with that adversity. And don't get me wrong, there are some situations where that is BS, but I'm talking about dealing with it on a real world level. All right. You're going to be thrown into situations in real life, especially between the ages of 18 and 30, that are uncomfortable, where you're given a role you don't want, and maybe something goes down and someone gets sick and you got to do their job for the day. It's a major life skill to be adaptable to those situations that you can learn in sport, any sport. Right.
Yeah. That next up philosophy has to be ingrained in children, and it has to happen when you're young enough. Suck at it.
We suck at it. Like, again, parents, I'll implore you. And like I said, I say this because I have felt the tension now for my son over the last 2 seasons that I never felt before in my life, not having a kid in hockey, excuse me. But you got to keep those larger life lessons in play. Right. And coaches, it's really on you to make sure that message is told to the parents. And like, you got a hotshot parent thinks their kid's great. We've all experienced that. It doesn't trump real life. Right. And there's a way that those two things can coexist. All right. Like what the expectations are, what the roles are, what the standards are. It seems like reoccurring themes in these episodes, which I love. Don't worry. They're not ever going to get old. But again, look, we're talking about practice. Christie, it's up to you to grade us. How'd we do?
I'm giving you guys an A+. This was a great episode.
And
I know we kind of got off the beaten path a little bit on occasion, but
that never happens on this show.
Reined it back in. But you know what? The bottom line is, we're all on this really, this journey. It's a wonderful journey. And just don't lose sight of that. And there's so many great opportunities along the way. You got to seize them and make the most of it. And even if it's just talking about practice.
Man, I can't close any better than that. I'm just going to have to go right into the ending with that. I'm going to give you that one, because
nothing up my sleeve. Anyway, this was fun.
It was fun. It's like you're an anchor on TV or something. I don't know how you do it. Mike, any final words before we jump off? I think it was a great episode too.
No, that was great, and thanks for bringing it up. And I think I'll like everything else. It's good to have these. We do these on Mondays, and
it's good for the week.
Sets me up. It sets me up for the week and my practices, and I'll start reevaluating what I'm doing here even tonight.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining the three of us on our therapy session. It's every Monday.
Yeah, now I got to go back to the drawing board. Damn it.
There you go. That's what we do here. So listen, you've been listening to Our Kids Play Hockey. You can check out every episode we've ever done. Every one of them has been listened to in the last 30 days. You're an amazing audience, right? OurKidsPlayHockey.com. Make sure you check it out. If you have any topics or any conversations you want to have with us, you can email us at team@OurKidsPlayHockey.com. But above all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being great people, great parents, great coaches. If you're listening to this show, we're gonna shuffle you into that one. And until next week, For Christie Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. Have a great week, everybody.